Widowed businessman closes million-dollar deal, but cancels everything upon seeing woman identical to late wife. Richard Thomas Blackwell was about to sign the most important contract of his career when he felt the world stop around him. His hands trembled so much that the golden pen slipped through his fingers, landing on the mahogany table with a sharp thud that echoed through the conference room. The lawyer who had just entered the 30th floor office of the commercial building in New York City had the exact same face as Margaret, his wife who had passed away 5 years prior. It wasn't just a passing resemblance. It was as if Margaret had returned from their youth, with the same expressive eyes, the same elegant way of moving, even the subtle scent of lilac she always wore. "Mr. Blackwell?" the young woman asked, extending her hand in greeting. "I'm Jennifer Mitchell, the attorney representing the purchasing company. I'm here to finalize the details of the agreement." Richard couldn't move. His 68 years suddenly felt like stones weighing on his shoulders as he studied every detail of the woman's face before him. The same delicate tilt of her head when she spoke, the same faint smile at the corner of her lips, even the way she held the documents between her fingers. "Sir? Are you all right?" Jennifer repeated, concerned by the sudden paleness of the man. Across the table, Michael Cooper, his partner of 15 years, watched the scene with peculiar interest. At 42, Michael had always been ambitious, but at that moment, there was something different in his gaze. Something Richard, in his stunned state, failed to notice. "I need a moment," Richard murmured, abruptly rising from his chair. "The meeting is cancelled." "Cancelled?" Michael stood as well, feigning surprise. "Richard, this is $50 million. We can't just—" "I said it's cancelled!" Richard nearly shouted, storming out of the room without looking back. Jennifer stood frozen in the middle of the room, clutching the contracts that represented months of work. She had prepared intensely for this negotiation, studying every detail of the Blackwell Builders' acquisition proposal. "My apologies," Michael said, approaching her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My partner has been under a lot of stress lately. Personal issues, you know how it is." "I understand," Jennifer replied, though she didn't understand at all. "Can we reschedule for another time?" Of course, I'll be in touch." Michael walked her to the door. "And thank you for coming in person. I know your presence here was impactful." There was something odd in his tone, but Jennifer couldn't place it. She left the building still confused by the businessman's reaction. Richard had locked himself in the office bathroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His hands still shook uncontrollably. How was this possible? Margaret had been exactly that age when they met, 36 years ago. The resemblance was so unsettling that he questioned his own sanity. He spent the rest of the day isolated in his office, canceling all meetings. He couldn't get the image of Jennifer Mitchell out of his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Margaret smiling at him on their wedding day, wearing the same lilac perfume he had caught in the conference room. That evening, in his penthouse on the Upper East Side, Richard pored over the photo albums he kept in his safe. Margaret at 32, the exact age Jennifer appeared to be. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Even when he tried to find differences, he couldn't. It was as if Margaret had been reborn in someone else. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Over the next week, Richard couldn't focus on anything else. The company began to feel his absence, with important decisions being delayed and clients growing impatient. Michael took on more and more responsibilities, appearing concerned but secretly pleased with his increasing control. "Richard, we need to talk," Michael said, entering the room without knocking. "The investors are asking about the delay in the deal. Some are considering withdrawing their interest." "Leave me alone, Michael," Richard murmured, turning his chair to look out the window. "I can't. We're partners. Your instability is affecting our business," Michael said, sitting across from the desk. "What happened in that meeting?" Richard finally turned to face him. Over the past few weeks, he had noticed subtle changes in his partner's behavior, an overconfidence, a way of speaking that bordered on insubordination. The lawyer, She looks like Margaret, Richard said, his voice strained. Oh yes, I noticed a slight resemblance, Michael replied with suspicious ease. But that's no reason to throw $50 million down the drain. A slight resemblance? Richard stood abruptly. She's identical to Margaret. Didn't you find that strange? Michael shrugged, but there was something calculating in his eyes. People look alike, Richard. It happens. You can't let ghosts from the past destroy our future. The word ghosts echoed in Richard's mind. There was something about the way Michael spoke that deeply unsettled him, as if he knew more than he was letting on. That night, Richard made a decision that would change everything. He hired a private investigator, the same one Margaret had used years ago to try and find information about her family. Derek Sullivan was a discreet and efficient man, known for handling delicate cases for New York City's high society. I want to know everything about Jennifer Mitchell, Richard said during their meeting in Derek's office. Where she was born, who her parents are, where she studied, everything. Any specific reason? Derek asked, taking notes. She looks like my late wife, exactly like her. I want to understand if there's a family connection. Richard hesitated before continuing. And I also want you to investigate my partner, Michael Cooper. Something strange is going on. Derek nodded. In his 15 years in the profession, he had learned that coincidences were rarely just coincidences, especially when large sums of money were involved. Meanwhile, Jennifer tried to understand why she couldn't stop thinking about the businessman who had reacted so strangely to her presence. There was something familiar about those eyes behind the glasses, a deep sadness she recognized but couldn't place. She had grown up with her adoptive mother, Mrs. Eleanor, in a modest home in Queens. She had always known she was adopted, but had never been interested in searching for her biological family. Eleanor was everything she needed in a mother. Loving, devoted, hard-working. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Jennifer said during dinner at the house where she'd grown up. "Of course, dear. What is it?" "Do you know anything about my biological family? If I had siblings or anything like that?" Mrs. Eleanor, a 67-year-old woman with neatly styled grey hair, hesitated for a moment. Why the sudden question? Something strange happened at work. A man reacted very oddly when he saw me, like he knew me from somewhere. Jennifer pushed her food around thoughtfully. He said I reminded him of someone. "Dear, you've always known you were adopted as an infant. Your birth mother was very young, unable to raise a child," Eleanor said carefully. "But I've always suspected she wasn't alone at the maternity ward." "What do you mean?" "At the time, there were rumors that there might have been another baby, a sister, but I could never confirm it." Jennifer felt a shiver run down her spine. A sister? Would that explain the strange feeling he had when seeing Richard Blackwell's reaction? In the days that followed, Derek Sullivan worked tirelessly on the investigation. What he uncovered about Michael Cooper was disturbing. There were records of secret meetings with competitors of Blackwell builders, suspicious financial transactions, and most importantly, evidence that he had known Jennifer Mitchell long before she was hired for the case. The discoveries about Jennifer were even more surprising. Born in Jersey City, the daughter of a 17-year-old girl who was forced by her family to give up the babies for adoption. Babies, plural. Derek found old hospital records confirming the birth of twins on March 15, 1992. One was adopted by Eleanor Mitchell, becoming Jennifer. The other had vanished from official records. That was when Derek found something that made his blood run cold. In Margaret Blackwell's personal files, he found correspondence with the same hospital. Margaret had spent the last months of her life desperately searching for a twin sister she never knew existed. "Mr. Blackwell," Derek called Richard as soon as he had organized all the information. "I need to speak with you urgently. What I've discovered will change everything." Richard received Derek at his home late that afternoon. The detective spread documents, photos, and certificates across the living room table. "Your wife, Margaret, had a twin sister," Derek said bluntly, "and Jennifer Mitchell is that sister's daughter." Richard sank heavily into the armchair, as if he'd been punched in the gut. "What do you mean?" "Margaret and her sister were born in Jersey City, the daughters of very young parents. They were separated as infants and given to different families. Margaret never knew her sister existed until just a few months before." she passed. Derek showed handwritten letters in Margaret's delicate script. She hired detectives, combed through records, spent a fortune searching. She discovered her sister had gotten pregnant young and, unfortunately, didn't survive childbirth. But she left behind a daughter. "Jennifer," Richard murmured, his hands trembling as he held one of the letters. "Exactly. Margaret only found out about her niece 2 weeks before she passed. She didn't have time to meet her." Derek paused. "But there's more about your partner." The revelations about Michael were devastating. He had discovered Margaret's research and, after her passing, continued investigating on his own. Not out of altruism, but ambition. "Michael has known about Jennifer for years," Derek explained. "He tracked her, knew when she graduated from law school, when she started working at the firm representing the buyers. He orchestrated everything so she would be assigned to this specific case." "But why?" Richard asked, though he already suspected the answer. "To destabilize you. Michael believed seeing someone identical to your wife would leave you emotionally shaken, unable to make rational decisions. His plan was to take control of the company after your psychological collapse." Richard felt a mix of anger and sorrow. Michael, whom he had considered almost a son, had planned his emotional destruction using the very pain of losing Margaret. "Are you certain about this?" "Absolutely. I have recordings, documents, everything." Derek handed over a flash drive. "Michael never imagined I was investigating both cases at the same time." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He wandered the empty house, gazing at the photos of Margaret scattered throughout the rooms. Knowing she had searched for her family in her final moments, and that her niece was right there, just a few feet away, was both comforting and painful. He decided he needed to speak with Jennifer, but didn't know how to approach the subject. "How do you tell someone that she's your late wife's niece, and that she was used in a scheme of manipulation?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us tremendously as we're just starting out. Now continuing, the next morning Richard worked up the courage and called the law firm where Jennifer worked. "Miss Mitchell, this is Richard Blackwell. I'd like to speak with you. About personal matters, not professional ones." Jennifer was surprised by the call. Since the incident at the meeting, she hadn't had any contact with him. "Of course, Mr. Blackwell. When would be convenient?" "Today, if possible. I know it's unusual, but it's very important." They arranged to meet at a discreet cafe in the city center. Richard arrived first, choosing a corner table, away from prying ears. When Jennifer walked in, he felt that same shock of seeing young Margaret coming toward him. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Richard said, standing to greet her. "I imagine this has to do with your reaction at the meeting," Jennifer replied, sitting down and studying his face. "I must admit, I've been curious." Richard took a deep breath. How do you start a conversation that would change both their lives? "Jennifer, may I call you that?" She nodded. "I need to tell you something that may seem impossible, but it's true. You look exactly like my late wife." "People can resemble each other sometimes," Jennifer answered, echoing Michael's words. "It's not just the resemblance, it's everything. The way you move, the way you speak, even the lilac perfume you wear," Richard said, pulling a photo from his wallet. "This is Margaret, my wife. She passed away 5 years ago." Jennifer looked at the photo and felt a chill. The likeness was truly striking. They could have been sisters. "It's a remarkable resemblance," she admitted. "But I don't understand why you wanted to show me this." "Because I discovered you were related," Richard said softly. "Margaret was your aunt, the twin sister of your biological mother." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer stared at the photo, then at Richard, trying to process the information. How could you know that?" Richard told her everything. The investigation, the documents, Margaret's desperate search in her final months. Jennifer listened in silence, occasionally touching the photo as if she could feel some connection to the aunt she'd never known. "Margaret always felt incomplete," Richard continued. "She said she was missing something, that there was a void in her life she couldn't explain. In her last years, that feeling grew stronger. And she found out about me." 2 weeks before she passed. She didn't have time to meet you. Richard wiped away a discreet tear. But she left letters. She said she wanted to know you, to care for you like the niece she'd always wished for. Jennifer felt emotions swirling in her chest, joy at discovering she had family, sadness at never having known Margaret, confusion over the whole situation. But there's more. Richard hesitated. About my partner, Michael. He found out about you and orchestrated your involvement in the negotiation to emotionally destabilize me. What? Jennifer straightened in her chair. What do you mean? Richard explained Michael's plan, the evidence Derek had gathered, the carefully orchestrated manipulation. I was used. Jennifer's voice trembled with anger. He used me to hurt you. Without you knowing, you're as much a victim as I am. Richard reached his hand across the table. But now we know the truth. Jennifer looked at his outstretched hand and, after a moment's hesitation, took it. It was the first time she'd touched someone from Margaret's family. What do we do now? She asked. First, we confront Michael. Then, I'd very much like to get to know the niece Margaret wanted so badly to meet. That afternoon, Michael was in his office, reviewing contracts and planning how to speed up the transfer of power in the company. He had expected Richard to be completely unhinged by that point, but the businessman seemed to be recovering from the initial shock. He hadn't anticipated seeing Richard and Jennifer walk into his office together. Michael, we need to talk, Richard said, closing the door behind them. Of course. Michael forced a smile. Good to see you've decided to resume negotiations. Actually, we're here to talk about manipulation and betrayal, Jennifer said, her voice sharp. Michael's smile faltered. I don't understand. We know everything, Michael. Richard placed the flash drive on the desk. The secret meetings, the plans to destabilize me, how you found out about Jennifer, and orchestrated her involvement in the deal. Michael stared at the flash drive as if it were a bomb about to explode. Richard, you're confused. I don't know what you're talking about. Recordings of your conversations with competitors, records of suspicious bank transfers, evidence of how you tracked Jennifer and influenced her hiring for this case. Richard listed calmly. 15 years of partnership, Michael. You were like a son to me. Michael's mask finally slipped. His friendly expression gave way to something cold and calculating. A son? He laughed bitterly. I was always treated like an employee, never a real partner. You made all the important decisions, took the best projects, got all the recognition. You owned 40% of the company. 40% of nothing when you controlled everything. Michael stood abruptly. And after Margaret left, you became even more controlling. It was obvious you'd never let me take what I deserved. Jennifer watched the argument silently, still processing that she'd been used as a pawn in a power game. So you decided to destroy me psychologically? Richard asked, his voice heavy with disappointment. I decided to speed up the inevitable. You were becoming an obstacle to the company's growth. Michael turned to Jennifer. And you, little girl, are just a victim in this story. Your role was perfect. My role? Jennifer stood, her eyes blazing with anger. You used my resemblance to Margaret to try and destroy a man grieving his wife. And it worked, didn't it? Look at his state these past weeks. Michael gestured toward Richard. Pathetic. That's when Richard displayed a calmness that surprised them both. You know, Michael, you're right about one thing. I was pathetic, lost in grief, unable to move forward. He looked at Jennifer. But discovering my niece, understanding that Margaret was searching for family in her final moments, that gave me a new purpose. Niece? Michael blinked, confused. Jennifer is the daughter of Margaret's twin sister, the family she spent her life looking for. Richard smiled for the first time in weeks. Your plan led me to her. Michael realized he had completely underestimated the situation. He thought he was manipulating coincidences, when in fact he had facilitated a family reunion. This changes nothing. He tried to regain composure. You're still emotionally unstable. The company needs strong leadership. You're right, Richard agreed, to Jennifer's surprise. The company does need strong leadership. That's why, as of tomorrow, you're no longer part of it. You can't fire me. I'm a partner. I can, when there's evidence of sabotage, misuse of confidential information, and attempted fraudulent manipulation. Richard headed for the door. My lawyers will be in touch. I hope yours are competent. Jennifer followed Richard, leaving Michael alone with the consequences of his actions. Outside the building, Richard turned to her. I'm sorry you got caught up in this. Don't be. If it weren't for this, I'd never have discovered my family. Jennifer smiled shyly. May I? Can I know more about Margaret? I'd love to share everything I know about her. Richard felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. If you'd like, we can start today. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the days that followed, Richard and Jennifer spent hours talking about Margaret. He showed her photo albums, shared stories from their 36 years of marriage, and revealed memories he'd kept only to himself. Jennifer was fascinated to learn that Margaret had been a literature teacher, passionate about classic American books. She herself had studied law, but had always been drawn to literature, never quite understanding why. Margaret would have loved meeting you, Richard said, flipping through an old album. She always wanted children, but we couldn't have any. She said if we ever had a daughter, she'd teach her all about the great American writers. I've been reading Mark Twain since I was a teenager, Jennifer remarked. Mrs. Eleanor never understood where that interest came from. Margaret used to say some passions run in the blood, Richard smiled. Maybe she was right. During one of these conversations, Jennifer decided to introduce Mrs. Eleanor to Richard. They met at her modest home in Queens on a Sunday afternoon. So you're the widower of my Jennifer's sister, Eleanor said, serving coffee and homemade cookies. Actually, we've discovered Jennifer is legally my niece, Richard explained. Margaret was married to me when she learned of her existence. Eleanor studied Richard carefully. She had experience judging people and saw sincerity in his eyes. I always knew there was more family out there somewhere, she finally said. Jennifer always had a different air about her, more refined. I did what I could, but I knew it wasn't just my influence. You did a wonderful job, Richard said sincerely. Margaret would be proud of the woman Jennifer has become. And now? Eleanor asked directly. What happens to my daughter? She's still your daughter, Richard replied at once. I'd just like to be part of the family too, if you'll allow it. Jennifer felt her eyes well up. For the first time in her life, she was experiencing what it meant to have a large, connected family. Meanwhile, Michael's situation was deteriorating rapidly. The evidence Derek had gathered was irrefutable, and other minority partners in the company voted unanimously for his removal. On top of that, major clients cancelled contracts upon learning of his questionable practices. Michael tried to sue Richard for defamation, but his own lawyers advised him to settle. The recordings of his conversations with competitors could lead to criminal charges for corporate espionage. You destroyed your own career, Richard said during their only conversation after the expulsion. And for what? Envy? You never understood, Michael replied bitterly. You always had everything. Family, company, respect. Some of us had to fight for scraps. I offered you a real partnership. You chose sabotage. And now you have your family back. Michael laughed dryly. What a perfect ending to your story. Richard didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. With Michael gone from the company, Richard had to completely restructure management. That's when he had an idea that would change everything. Jennifer, I'd like to make you a proposal, he said over lunch. How would you like to work with us? What do you mean? The company needs a strong in-house legal department. You have the knowledge, the dedication, and your family, Richard smiled. Margaret always said family should work together. Jennifer was tempted but hesitated. I don't want people to think I got the position because of nepotism. Then prove you deserve it. Start as an external consultant, show your worth, and then we'll decide about a permanent position, Richard proposed. How about starting by finalizing the original deal? After all, you know all the details. The offer was tempting. Jennifer knew she had the skills for the job, and the idea of helping the company Margaret had supported for so many years was comforting. "I accept," she said, "but I want to do things the right way." I wouldn't expect anything less from Margaret's niece. Returning to the negotiations of the original deal brought unexpected challenges. During Michael's absence, some competitors had approached the buyers, offering alternative proposals. "They're offering 15% less than us," Rachel, Richard's assistant, informed, "and a shorter delivery time." Richard and Jennifer analyzed the situation in the meeting room, the same room where it had all begun, but now the atmosphere was collaborative rather than tense. "We need to understand why they can offer lower prices," Jennifer said, studying the documents. "Either there's something wrong with our proposal or they're hiding costs." After days of analysis, they discovered the competitors had significantly underestimated material and labor costs. It was an unsustainable proposal that would lead to delays and quality issues. "Let's present this analysis to the buyers," Richard decided. "Show them that the low price isn't worth the risks." The new presentation was a success. Jennifer demonstrated impressive technical knowledge, pointing out flaws in the competitors' proposals that even the buyers hadn't noticed. "Excellent work," said Dr. William Reynolds, the buyer's representative. "This is the kind of detailed analysis we expect from our partners." The deal was finally signed, but now it meant much more than money. It was the first joint project between uncle and niece, a bridge between Margaret's past and the family's future. During the office celebration, Richard made a special toast. "This deal isn't just a business success, it's proof that a united family builds lasting things." He raised his glass. "Margaret would be proud." Jennifer felt deep emotion. For the first time, she understood what Margaret had felt in her final moments, searching for family, the sense of belonging, of being part of something greater. But the challenges were far from over. Michael, though removed from the company, kept trying to undermine the business. He spread rumors about Richard's mental instability and questioned Jennifer's nepotistic hiring. "Some clients are hesitant to sign new contracts," Rachel reported in a meeting. "The rumors are hurting our reputation." Richard felt his anger rise, but Jennifer calmed him. "We'll handle this the right way," she said, "with transparency and professionalism." They organized a meeting with key clients, where Richard explained the situation honestly. He presented the evidence against Michael, clarified his relationship with Jennifer, and showed that the company was stronger than ever. "I'd rather work with honest people who admit problems and fix them," said Dr. Robert Thompson, one of their biggest clients. "That shows character." The strategy worked. Not only did they retain existing clients, but they also attracted new ones, impressed by the management's transparency. Months passed, and their daily work routine strengthened the bond between Richard and Jennifer. She became not just an efficient consultant, but a comforting presence, easing the loneliness he had carried since Margaret's passing. "You know, sometimes I feel like Margaret is here through you," Richard said over coffee at the end of the workday. "Not just because of the physical resemblance, but the way of thinking, of solving problems." "Tell me more about how she was at work," Jennifer requested. "Margaret didn't work directly for the company, but she was always my most trusted advisor. Whenever I had important doubts, I'd talk to her. She had a way of seeing solutions that I couldn't." "Like now," Jennifer observed. "You've questioned my analyses of the proposals, but we always reach better conclusions together." "Exactly. It's as if her way of thinking passed to you through blood," Richard paused. "Or maybe it's just coincidence." "I don't believe in coincidences," Jennifer smiled. "Not after everything that's happened." Their personal lives were also changing. Richard began socializing again, accepting invitations he'd refused for years. Jennifer, who had always been reserved, started opening up more, especially with Mrs. Eleanor. "My daughter is different," Eleanor remarked to Richard during a family Sunday. "More confident, more whole." "I feel different too," Richard admitted, "as if I've found a new purpose." It was during one of these family gatherings that Eleanor made an unexpected revelation. "Richard, can I tell you something I've kept for a long time?" "Of course, Mrs. Eleanor." "When I adopted Jennifer, the social worker mentioned there was another baby, a twin sister who was also to be given up for adoption." She paused, choosing her words. "I always wanted to find that sister so the girls could know each other." "Did you try to look?" "I did, but back then it was very difficult. We had no resources, didn't know the system, Eleanor looked at Jennifer. But I always knew fate would bring them together somehow. And it did, Jennifer said, moved. Through Uncle Richard. It was a revelation that closed another circle. Margaret had searched for family. Eleanor had searched for Jennifer's sister. And now, decades later, they were all connected. At that moment, Richard made a decision that had been brewing for weeks. "Jennifer, I have an official proposal for you," he said solemnly. "I'd like you to become a partner in the company." "Partner?" Jennifer was surprised. "But I just started working here." "You've proven your worth many times. The company is growing. We need young, capable leadership," Richard explained. "And Margaret always wanted the company to be a family legacy." "But I don't have the capital to invest in a partnership," Jennifer protested. "The shares would be a gift. 20% of the company with a voice in all major decisions," Richard smiled. "Consider it an uncle's gift to his niece." Jennifer was silent for a long moment. It was an overwhelmingly generous offer, one that would change her life completely. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but know the offer comes from the heart, not just reason." Richard held her hand. Margaret would have done the same. That night, Jennifer talked at length with Mrs. Eleanor about the proposal. "It's a unique opportunity, dear," her adoptive mother said, "but only accept if it's what you truly want." "I always imagined having my own law firm, working with big clients, important cases," Jennifer confessed. "But being at the company, working with Uncle Richard, it feels like something Margaret would approve of." "And what does your heart say?" Jennifer considered the question. Over the past months, she'd discovered not just a family, but a purpose she hadn't known she was searching for. "My heart says Margaret was right. Families should work together." The following Monday, Jennifer gave her answer. "I accept the partnership," she said, entering Richard's office. "But with one condition." "What is it?" "I want to create a legal department that helps small family businesses, in honor of Margaret and Mrs. Eleanor," Jennifer explained. "Women who built families with love and dedication." Richard felt his eyes grow moist. It was exactly the kind of idea Margaret would have proposed. "She would have loved this," he said, hugging his niece. "Welcome to the Blackwell Builders family." The formalization of the partnership brought positive changes to the entire company. Jennifer implemented new processes, modernized contracts, and established the Legal Assistance Department for small businesses. Their first case was deeply moving. A 70-year-old woman who was losing her family home due to bureaucratic issues. Jennifer worked tirelessly to resolve the situation without charging any fees. "This is exactly what Margaret would have done," Richard remarked, watching Jennifer assist the client with patience and kindness. "I learned from the best," Jennifer smiled, glancing at him and then at Mrs. Eleanor, who had come to witness the new department's first day. But not everything was smooth. Michael, seeing the company's growing success, intensified his attempts at sabotage. He began suing former clients, claiming he had developed projects during his time at the company and had rights to them. "He's trying to drag us into endless legal battles," Jennifer analyzed the documents. "His strategy is to drain our resources and tarnish our reputation. What can we do? Fight back. Prove the projects were developed by the company, not by him individually." Jennifer stood up, determined. "And I have an idea to end this once and for all." Jennifer's idea was risky but brilliant. Instead of defending against each lawsuit individually, she proposed gathering all the evidence against Michael and suing him for unfair competition and defamation. "It's a high-stakes gamble," Richard observed. "If we lose, we could face a massive settlement." "If we do nothing, he'll keep attacking us for years," Jennifer argued. "We need to end this now." They worked for weeks preparing the case. Derek Sullivan was instrumental, providing additional evidence of Michael's questionable practices. They discovered he had tried bribing employees from other firms to obtain confidential information. The trial was intense. Michael hired expensive lawyers and tried to discredit Jennifer, claiming a conflict of interest due to her being Richard's niece. "Your Honor," Jennifer argued in her closing statement, "family is built on trust and honest work." The defendant tried to destroy both through manipulation and betrayal. Allowing him to escape accountability would reward dishonesty. The ruling favored Blackwell builders. Michael was ordered to pay substantial damages and was banned from working in New York City's construction industry for 5 years. Justice was served, Richard said as they left the courthouse. Margaret would be proud, Jennifer replied, and they both knew it was true. With Michael finally out of their lives, the company entered a period of rapid growth. New projects poured in, drawn by their reputation for integrity and competence. Jennifer proved herself not just an excellent lawyer, but a natural strategist. Her market analyses and expansion ideas even impressed Richard, with his decades of experience. "You have a gift for business," he said after a presentation she led masterfully. Margaret had it too, though she never worked formally in the field. "Maybe it's genetic," Jennifer joked, but there was truth in it. Their personal lives flourished as well. Richard began attending social events again, always accompanied by Jennifer and Mrs. Eleanor. The trio became a notable presence in New York City's high society, not for show, but for the authenticity of their bond. "You three make a beautiful family, Doctor," Sarah Williams remarked. Sarah Williams, an architect who frequently collaborated with the company. It's rare to see such genuine connections. During one of these social occasions, Richard met Catherine Wilson, a 62-year-old widow who ran an educational foundation. The conversation flowed naturally, and for the first time in years, Richard felt drawn to someone. "She seems like a special person," Jennifer remarked after observing the interaction. "Margaret would want you to be happy. Would it bother you?" "Uncle Richard, Margaret passed 5 years ago. You deserve companionship, someone to share your life with," Jennifer smiled. "Besides, now you have family to support you in any decision." The relationship between Richard and Catherine developed slowly, with mutual respect and consideration for her children. Jennifer and Mrs. Eleanor were instrumental in ensuring the new union was accepted by everyone. "It's strange to think that when all this began I was alone and desperate," Richard reflected during a family dinner. "And now I have a wonderful niece, a thriving business, and even a new companion." "Life's paths are mysterious," Mrs. Eleanor observed. "Sometimes what seems like a tragedy is just the beginning of something better." End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story of resilience and family. Do you believe fate truly brought Richard and Jennifer together? Share your thoughts in the comments. We love reading every heartfelt message. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories.